beginning to understand that what you focus on controls you. And I don't necessarily mean that in the sense of like the day-to-day things that we focus on. Looking at this one thing compared to another. I don't necessarily mean it in the sense that just looking at a certain thing or focusing on a certain thing for any point in time will then completely have control over you. That's not what I mean. When I say that what you focus on controls you, I really mean it in a broader sense. I mean in the sense that if you allow something to take your focus, if you allow something to take your attention, then it will inevitably end up controlling the way that you think. It'll inevitably end up controlling the way that you feel. And inevitably, it'll end up controlling the way that you act and the way that you live in the world. I'm beginning to understand that if we focus on the things of the world, then we're never going to actually obtain anything that we truly desire. And I know it seems a bit counterintuitive because I think a lot of us think that the things that we want are in the world, but that's not true. I'm beginning to understand that all the things that we do want in the physical world, all the things that we do want, that we can see, that we can materialize, that we can hold in our hand, it's not necessarily that we want those things, it's that we want the feeling of having them. We want the feeling that it would give us to have these certain things. We want the emotions, we want the attitude, we want the energy that these things would give us, not necessarily the things themselves. But I'm starting to understand that if we focus on the world and we try to obtain these things in the world, then inevitably we're not going to obtain what we really want, which is the feeling of having those things. I'm beginning to understand that what you focus on controls you, in the sense that if you think that you should focus on the world in order to obtain something in the world, then you're never going to actually obtain what you want. If you focus on the world, then you're never going to be able to give yourself something. Because if you focus on the world, you'll always be acting reactively instead of proactively. If you're constantly reacting to what the world is putting in front of you, then you're never going to be able to substantiate what you want if it doesn't align with what the world is in the present moment. So I'm really just starting to understand how important it is that we don't focus on the world. We don't focus on what's in front of us, what we see, what we hear, what we smell, what we touch, what we taste. I think it's important that we focus on the feeling of having these things. Because the feelings is something that we could substantiate for ourselves at any given point in time. I think that we've almost been tricked into believing that, happiness, to think that peace is something that is connected to something that we can only gain externally. But I'm getting to understand that these emotions are things that you can substantiate at any given point in time. There's not conditional. Just in the way that, we say unconditional love, I think it's very possible to have unconditional happiness. That regardless of what's in front of you, you can be in a good mood. And it's not about necessarily completely ignoring what's in front of you, but it's almost about recognizing that what's in front of you is not all that there is. What you can see is not all that there is. So it's about substantiating the feelings of having what you want. It's about substantiating those feelings in the present moment and existing in that feeling. And in doing so, I think you almost recognize that you're fully doing that when you no longer actually desire seeing that, or you no longer desire having that thing that you once desired in the physical world. It's like saying how, okay, if you want $1 million, well, really you want the feeling of having $1 million. So then if you give yourself the feeling of having $1 million in the present moment, then you're no longer going to want $1 million. You no longer really care for it. Because any true benefit that you gain from it, any true emotions that you gain from it, is something that you've already given to yourself. And I think that in substantiating those emotions in the present moment, we're also almost allowing the physical manifestation of our desires to actually appear as well. But I think a lot of it is about leaving up to God. Because I'm really starting to understand that we don't have control over anything except for ourselves. We don't have control over anything in the outside world. That's not us, that's God. That's why God doesn't judge you for your circumstances, He judges you for your character. He judges you for who you are, not what happens to you. So it's almost about recognizing that if we substantiate the feelings of the manifestation of our desires in the present moment, then we almost just allow God's work to be done in the external world. If the physical manifestation is something that's really meant for us, if it's in God's will for our lives to have, then it's something that we will have over time. It's not something we can chase. You can't force God's hand. You can just allow it to work in your life. You can just allow it to substantiate in your life. And I think that we do that by almost letting go of the world. We stop focusing on the world. Because like I said, if we constantly focus on the world, then we'll always be acting reactive instead of proactive. And how can you ever substantiate anything that you want, anything that you desire, if you're always reacting to something that you don't want? I think it's important that we substantiate what we do want instead of reacting to what we don't want. And in substantiating what we do want, we're allowing what we want to appear in our lives. It's I don't know, it's just a really interesting thing that I've been thinking a lot about recently. In the sense that we literally cannot control the world. And if you're constantly reacting, if you're constantly looking at something and saying, hey, I don't want this, then when are you ever going to have the time to say, hey, look at what I have? Look at what I do want. This is what I have right now. So I'm really just starting to understand that it's important that we focus on not the things of the world, but we focus on the transformation of our mind. We focus on the transformation of our spirit. And in doing so, we're almost allowing what we want in the physical world to happen naturally. But it's no longer something that is conditional for the feelings that you want. It's no longer something that you need. It's rather just something that you can have, not necessarily required or not necessarily necessitated. It's no longer something that you're dependent on. It's something that you're just allowing to happen. When you're good with that and you're good without it, that's when it finally happens. So I have a Bible verse aligned with the topic of this video pretty well. Taken from 1 John 2 verse 15, and it says, love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. So it's really just about understanding that our love, what we focus on, what we appreciate, what we spend time thinking about, it shouldn't necessarily be the things that we see in front of us, because that's acting, or that's thinking reactively. But instead, we should focus on what we do want, not what we don't want. We should focus on the feeling and substantiating that feeling in the present moment. And in doing so, we're allowing the rest of it just to happen naturally. We're allowing what we do want to substantiate itself in the present moment. But it's no longer something that we're dependent on. It's something that we're allowing to happen. So that we're no longer dependent on the things of the world, but rather we're focused on the Spirit. We're focused on God's fruit in our lives. So I hope you just come from this video, and thank you for watching.